Hello, everyone. Welcome. Thank you all for being here. Um, I what I want to do today is that last week we covered a lot of territory. Okay, it was a phenomenal class, but we covered so much, and in meditation it came clear to me that I need to focus on these pieces a moment at a time and to expand on them and to allow us to have more time and more opportunity to process the information that we covered in last week's class. We talked about identities, personas, archetypes, and how that also affect our authentic core and our authentic nature. So I'm going to try to slow down all of these pieces and see if we can create a narrative that will allow you to identify and understand where you stand in this entire stretch. Given the fact that the planet is going through all of these rapid changes, and there are all these accelerated processes that we're going through, i.e., acceleration of our own karma. Remember, karma is not retaliation. It's not vengeance. It's not revenge. It's actually to repair and to correct. Therefore, anytime we are faced with a situation with a friend or family member, or for that matter, a situation either to an institution or some sort of collective body where we feel that we are being presented with some sort of like confrontation. But the way the karma works is that you're going to be triggered. You're going to be feeling that whatever is happening outside is somehow encroaching on your sovereignty, or you feel upset, angry, or agitated over what someone else is doing. I had multiple conversations with clients of recent time about how they are being triggered by karma. I remember one instance having a conversation where one of my clients was triggered by something that someone else was doing and has been triggered by it for the past 15 years. Now, granted this person is a criminal, but the way my client is triggered, the trigger is so strong that this criminal, is occupying free space in her consciousness. And she's not, and I had to say, you're coded to this person. So there is a karma, there's a link. When you see yourself emotionally seriously triggered by something, either you think it's an injustice or you think for whatever reason it's your responsibility to do X, Y, Z. Your responsibility is to become non-attached, to become neutral to everything, so that you can allow yourself to ascend and go and merge with God. This is the only way ascension will occur. So the more you're triggered by things, because you're coded. There is a polarized relationship between what you're upset about and something internally inside of you that you are not seeing, that's triggering it. And somehow you have to find a way to correct and repair what's inside of you. That's the trigger, because that's the key. And then if, for example, in the past life, you may have hurt this person or have done something to them to cause you to be so upset about what they're doing, you have to ask yourself for forgiveness. Right? And then you forgive them for whatever it is that they're doing. There are other, in other words, you have to pick your battles. Not every situation demands that you go in as an advocate or as a warrior to try to level everything down. If this is who you are, you're very far from ascension. You're very far from enlightenment. And it will take you a long time to achieve that kind of connection. So what I'm saying is that we need to understand the relationship that exists with outside events that are triggering our karma, and how they are for our benefit to repair and to correct. It's not revenge. It's not retaliation. You're not doing this to try. I had another conversation with somebody not too long ago, a very dear friend, about some outside thing that this friend of mine was seeing and decided to report it online. And I remember having that kind of conversation. I said, a loving advice to you. Be very careful. Although you reported this anonymously, this person is not aware of what you did. But karmically speaking, is this your battle? Whatever karma that this man who has influence has with other people, it's not your responsibility to try to influence it and to try to change it or end it or terminate it. You're not the police. If you're trying to become enlightened, you have to learn how to have empathy, compassion, and more importantly, non-attachment to certain things. Of course, if it's encroaching in your sovereignty and it's affecting you, you need to do something about it. I'm not telling you to turn the other cheek. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that there are certain things that are not our battle. And if you find yourself triggered to go after and to attack and to do something and to be, it's how you see yourself, how you identify yourself in relationship to this so-called outside threat or outside inequity or outside imbalance is not correct. This is not really who you are. So the first part of this is to understand through karma and through the repair. Again, karma is not revenge, it's not retaliation, it's repair, it's correction. So when you apply the correction, whatever it is on the outside, and by the way, my friend was more spiritually advanced. When I had the conversation with him, he understood. He got it immediately. He's like, I got it. I got exactly what you're saying. Because it's energetic. So the role for us to become enlightened is that we have to burn, we have to balance, we have to repair 51% of our karma, and ascension begins, right? If the role is for that and you're terminating and you're becoming non-attached to everything, and then in the course of living right now, you're being triggered by other things and relationship to people, influencers, other people in the world, and you're so upset about what they're doing because it's, to your perception, it's out of alignment, and you're doing something in the background to report them, you're not helping. You're creating more karma. The universe and God is capable of making the correction itself. You have to let go and become non-attached and let God take care of what God needs. And if the person is influencing people incorrectly, that influencer has a karma with the people in the circle of influence. It's not your responsibility to police and to be a member of the karmic board to try to effectuate and actualize the change. It's not your responsibility. I wanted to talk about this in that context of identity. How do we identify? How do we understand who we are and what we are? How do we see ourselves and perceive ourselves so that we, when the karma comes in, we don't fall in the trap of our current triggers, emotional triggers, and identity, and not understand that there is a deeper meaning. So in order for us, because if you all remember, this whole thing got initiated for me at the WISAC we did, where Lord Melchizedek, I did the channeling with Lord Melchizedek, and he was talking about identity. Our identity through the transit into the new earth will continue, evolve, and shift. And we have to have the emotional, psychological, and spiritual agility to go to multiple states of us being the caterpillar that goes into a chrysalis stage in a cocoon and rise as a butterfly. But these and I said multiple stages because it's the truth. You could very easily have change and alter course because you thought you were something. I can mention a few things on a regular basis. Men typically identify with what they do for a living. If you're an architect or an engineer, you identify for being an architect or an engineer. You identify with your profession. You're a lawyer. You identify with a lawyer. You're a shoemaker. You identify as a shoemaker. But when these things, because of the transit and the change that's happening in the world, when these things end for men, most of them lose their identity and they become depressed. They don't know who they are anymore. Let's say you were a soldier and all of a sudden you're out of war, you're not battling anymore, you resign from the service, and all of a sudden you come back out and you're like, I don't know who I am. What am I supposed to do? Women, on the other hand, connect and identify themselves with their emotional relationships. So their identity become, I am the giver, I am the provider, I am the, I'm the glue that keeps the family together. And most women identify with their emotional relationship. So those identities giving them acceleration will very quickly change because the universe is giving us lots of opportunities to repair and to correct so that because the gap that we have to go through from being a 3D being sealed or limited by the shell of a physical body to being a 5-dimensional being and beyond that exists everywhere in the universe simultaneously, that gap is immense. In one swoop, we will never be able to make it. Most of us will simply lose consciousness and we will not awaken. We will have to reincarnate and come back again to redo this again. So the idea of identity and understanding, okay, so I'm transitioning to this. And again, the transition from one state of consciousness to the next is called in Tibetan Buddhism, Bardo. And Bardo actually is a term that means a gap or an intermediary state that exists between two things, two states of consciousness, whether it's between being awake or asleep, or between inhalation, pause, the gap, and then exhalation, or being alive and going into death, or being dead and reincarnating in a physical body. So these gaps exist everywhere. And essentially, what I'm talking about now, transitioning from one identity to the next, it's a gap. It's a bardo. So we have, and the reason we're going through this bardo is that we have to go through two major gaps. One from 3D into 4D, one from 4D into 5D. These are immense, right? And each one of them have qualities, virtues, emotions, and all kinds of things that are so powerful that in order for our consciousness to adjust, most of us would not be able to make it in one leap. We would not be able to do it. So what the universe is doing is that it's providing all kinds of things around us to cause our belief system, how we identify ourselves as either being the provider, the giver, the supporter, the healer, to you becoming something else. Because that identity gets crumbled by external circumstances, gets confronted. And when that crumbles and falls apart, you have to somehow go through a bardo or a transition state where you're in fear, you're insecure, I don't know who I am, I'm slightly depressed, I'm not aware, not slightly depressed, some of us are going to get severely depressed. And I don't know who I am, I don't know what I am, and I need to figure out what's the next thing for me to do, how do I identify myself, I feel lost. And as we go through all of this internal conflict, and by the way, when the caterpillar goes to chrysalis stage, when they go in the cocoon, every molecule and atom in their body liquefy. and then gets rearranged. And this is why sometimes when you're looking at a cocoon, you see it moving, and it's because everything is being liquefied. It's not a comfortable state. They are going through a bardo. And as they move through this transition and move, then they will get rearranged. And when they step out of the cocoon, they become the butterfly. So we are going to similar stages, but in mini micro increment. Okay? Your identity may have been, I'm my profession, I'm an architect, I'm an artist, or I'm a chef, and all of a sudden that opportunity collapses and you can't seem to make it work. Or my emotional relationship, I was the provider, I was providing, I was the caregiver, and all of a sudden the caregiver thing just disappeared. And then now you have to redefine who you are. And that's going to take a minute. It may take several months, it may take a year or two, but at some point you're going to come on the other end and recreate a new identity. You're going to rise out of the cocoon as a butterfly. And when that happens, we have a tendency, and this is where Lord Melchizedek was very clear about this. We have a tendency to think, because I'm now the butterfly, after a year or a year and a half of analysis and everything else, I've become this new self and this new me, and I am now this new thing, and therefore, at perpetuity, this is who I am. Buckle up, my friends. Okay? Remember, I said micro shifts. Another 2 or 3 months, some of the circumstances will come to collapse and put the butterfly into another cocoon, to go to chrysalis again, so that the butterfly can rise as, let's say this time, as something else, and so on and so forth in multiple stages. So that's why I was sharing with you earlier that you have to have emotional agility. You have to be able to move very quickly through things to be able to say, as I'm moving through this, I have to be able to allow my consciousness. And the benefit to all of this is that most of the time when we go to bardo, let's say transition, when you're falling asleep, you're in a waking state and you're falling asleep, when the dream begins, you don't know how you got into the first dream. Because most of the time, the bardo transition is so jarring to our consciousness and so disorienting to our consciousness that most of us blank out and we awaken into the new state without consciously transitioning from identity 1 into identity 2. These mini bardos, these identity, small module of identity shift, are happening to allow us to be conscious and to practice the idea and the concept of remaining conscious while we're going to the bardo. And the reason for this is that in order for us to fully embody as a 5th dimensional being and beyond, we have to be conscious. We cannot allow our consciousness to pass out and awaken all of a sudden into something else, because if that happened during the gap from one dimension to another, you may end up in the wrong place. Because if you let what in Tibetan Buddhism they call our unconscious tendencies, which is what your emotional body will, the default of your emotional body. So if your emotional body is afraid of whatever, and you're afraid you're going to lose this, it will default you into a place that may take you to a lower realm instead of a higher realm. It may identify yourself with you may end up identifying yourself with the fear of losing XYZ or that identity, rather than saying, I'm transiting and I'm transforming. That fear, that identity, I have lost nothing. I am actually morphing and becoming something bigger. I'm expanding, I'm growing. And for that to happen, you have to be conscious. You have to make a choice bit by bit, moment by moment, choice by choice. We're going through all these multiple agile moment of shifting consciousness and changing identities. And as we do this, we begin to practice what in Buddhism they call the gathering of the natural light, which is to remain conscious through Baidu, to shift, and to do this self-aware. The whole point of enlightenment is self-realization. It's an expansion of your awareness. Because if you remain in your unconscious tendencies in the lower level of your emotional body and your subconscious mind, it serves no one. It's not enlightenment. So we need to be very aware that these gaps, these little moments where you thought you were something, whether you're facing a crisis, a health crisis, or a financial crisis, whether it is that you're facing a move from one location to another. I was sharing with you last week that I know somebody had moved, and sometimes we move prematurely because our instinct tells us to do something, and we do it maybe prematurely and realize, oh my God, I did this too early. So again, all of that, again, for this friend of mine that had moved too early, it's because he was triggered to move. Ultimately, he needed to move, but he did it too early because he felt into the fear. I can't be in that location anymore. So you see what I'm saying? It's a complex thing, and we have to sit down with ourselves and have internal conversation. This is the reason why for months now I've been teaching you how to have a conversation with your core, how to sit down and do the universal breath, and through that universal breath, sit in your core and see if your inner awareness has anything it wants to share with you. And the way you do this is that you begin to listen as if every cell in the 50 trillion cell in your body had ears. And you begin to listen to that core and see if it has information that will illuminate the right path for you. If there are parts that your core wants to teach you how to do correctly. Any questions, any comments? I'm going to stop for a moment.
Well, there's a lot to digest, but I do have a question here. If the transitions that we are making, micro transitions through the work that you've taught us in the querying and the location of transitions of false beliefs or past experiences that are blockages, that is a preparation then period. It's not the transition dimensionally, but without those in micro transitions, then we cannot make the major shifts. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, and actually, the moment you begin to do this work that I'm teaching you, you're already on the right bus. You're making the transition. Okay, but the transition is not one event. It's going to be these incremental micro steps, shift of identity, multiple little Baidu that you have to go through, where you identify yourself as Bambi, you identify yourself as Little Mermaid, and all of a sudden you realize, man, no, I'm not that innocent. There's a part of me that's maybe a little bit like Cruella de Vil or Ursula the Witch. And when you are that honest with yourself, and maybe it's a tilted axis, and you make the correction and the repair and realize, but I am not that tilted axis. I'm behaving like Cruella, but I am not Cruella. Who I am, who my soul is something else. you ask spirit at that moment in the conversation with your core, show me if God was walking in my footstep, what would God have done in the situation? Would I be as that cruel, or would I be something else? And then the correction will show up, and then now you know going forward, that's the new identity. That's what I have to become, right? And these micro little transits, as you do each one of them, it's step by step, you're going closer and closer to the dimensional transit. I can't separate, you cannot separate Janus one from the other. Do you understand what I'm
I
saying?
like what you said. If God were in my position, what would they do? How would they handle the changes needed or the situation at hand? And I think often about the channeling during Guisak that Chernice did with the archangel. I've forgotten which one, but
Camuel, yes.
yes, where he said, don't forget to call upon the archangels when you enter into a state of meditation to assist in your journey. And maybe that's another part of this. So these micro transitions with assistance from celestial beings may be becoming slightly less rocky.
Yes. Yes. And if you remember, I'm going to remind you, you're totally correct. And Archangel Camuel, of course, was correct. If you remember the Tibetan Book of the Dead, where they talk about the actual Bardo from being alive to reincarnating, that whole book, I covered this extensively in multiple classes. So one of the things that happened is that it's 49 days of transit that the person who is deceased has to transit for 49 days before they reincarnate into a new body, right? And as they're going this, every day they have a major transformational experience that's very scary. And every day there is a Buddha and his consort, or Dakini, which are like angels, who comes in, or that you pray to ask for assistance, for safe passage through that bardo, through that transit, through that gap. You're totally right. We don't have to do this alone. We can ask for help. You're absolutely right.
Thank you.
Yeah. So the idea is that as we're going through this, as we're moving through this, and by the way, that assistant is always provided. They come in and then they give you the safe passage, because it's very confusing to our consciousness. We're not sure if we're right, because we're pulled on one hand, or stomachs or gut is saying one thing, do this, do that, do that. You're afraid. And then the next thing you know, some other voice is coming in and saying the opposite. This is what happened when you're doing this micro identity shift. And it's like we're being tortured. But if you connect to spirit, this is why I've been pushing you so hard on your practice. That if you do the universal breath, which is the pranayama, the deep breath, and then you examine your core and you have a conversation with yourself, and then you ask God, spirit, and I do this all the time. When I'm always reflecting on what had happened to me already, or what is about to happen. And I'm always posing this question to myself: if God or Goddess was walking in my footsteps, what would she or he have done at this moment? Or if the situation already happened, what would Goddess or God would have done? And then I get a clear idea and concept. This is what God would have done. So if I'm slightly tilted, I need to correct. It's all about correction. I need to correct. If we were presented with opportunities to go from 3D being and 4D being in one swoop, we would not be able to make it. The fear, the landscape of the fourth dimension is so vastly and immensely different than what we're dealing with, we would not be able to cope. So our identity has to shift in little small increments. And as it shifts, eventually that core, again, essentially the conversation with yourself, the conversation with your core becomes the key. And by the way, the class I'll be teaching on Tuesday on the Antakarana and the bridge back to God is exactly about that. Through the connection to our chakra system and the chakra system going all the way back to God. That entire core that connects us back all the way back into spirit. So it's important for us to understand that those small little things I've been teaching you, and if you've been doing it, it takes the universal breath and the conversation with your core will take no more than 10 minutes in the morning. And if you do it, it gives you a better sense of who you are and where you stand energetically. But more importantly, it creates an inner presence. You're no longer asleep. You're not flatlining. You're present in your body. And when you're present in your body, you make choices. Because the goal is conscious transit and conscious immortality. That part is extremely important. Because if we become unconscious, and we pass out, we're gonna lower the denominator, which is off here. We're gonna go back to off here. And that fear is gonna trigger us to make the wrong decision and go to the wrong place, and we will not elevate. We will, instead of evolving, we will devolve. Any other questions, any other comments? What I want to add to this is related to karma and to things that we're going through. And I want to add another piece to this, which is that we are talking about our conscious self, I, the chooser, my conscious self, making these transitions by actively co-participating and co-creating. So it's a mental thing, it's a mind thing, where I am actively, through meditation practice to yoga practice, I'm actively trying to figure out where I am, who I am, and I'm trying to arise as a spiritual being by creating a bridge between I as a 3D being and God. I had said to you before, I think maybe 2 weeks ago in a class, right after we sat, I had said to you that the channeling I did, the first channeling I did would be the womb of the Divine Mother. Did not, when I wrote it, I started channeling it a month before, and it did not come to me in one fell swoop. It came to me in multiple pieces. And I had tried to explain it to you that when you're connecting to God from a 3D perspective, and even though you're in a state of surrender and you're letting go and you can feel the energy of the Divine Mother or Divine Father next to you, etc., the way you hear information or you may feel an energetic shift or a sense of surrender or that you're protected or that you are not alone. But in order for you to channel something, it's not the same when I'm trying to write something and I'm scribing it than when I'm channeling live. Because when I'm channeling live, here my ego self is to the back somewhere, and I feel like I'm a sock puppet. Somebody takes over my lips and my mouth, and the information is just flying out. I'm not conscious of it. It's just. In fact, sometime in the back, I'm opposing what's being said. I'm arguing and I'm saying, no, that's the wrong information, etc. Of course, it's the right information, but it's my ego who's very small and not knowledgeable enough that's trying to, that's saying all the wrong things. When I'm doing this kind of, I'm scribing things down, what happens is that it feels like the information is given, a sentence is given to me, but it's like spirit is in a car and I'm standing on the sidewalk and they're screaming it at me as the car is running, is going at 80 miles per hour. So sometimes I catch most of it, and there are certain things I don't catch. So I scribe things down and I write it. And then the next day, when I go back to that vibration and that frequency, when I read it again, spirit comes back, that same energy again, and the car goes back and correct it and saying, no, it's not that word, it's that one. It's not, and this is the way. And the reason I'm saying this to you, it's because the reason we want to be cautious to all the gap and the transition from one identity to the next, to the next, to the next, as we evolve, it's because we want to make sure the distortion I just described doesn't happen anymore. It's an edifice or a bridge. This is what Dantakarana is. It's a bridge that I am trying, we have to create by creating through our will, through practice of the spiritual practice of the yoga, so that we can have the ability, even in 3D, to be so attentive to what God is saying that we hear it completely through and through in one fell swoop. And there are no more distortion. So in addition to us shifting into the new earth, when we shift our consciousness, let's say my consciousness leave the 3D body and I'm anchored and grounded into my body, all my fourth dimensional chakras. When I'm in that state, I have to find a way to take the information in that 3D and translate it back to the rest of humanity, my circle of influence, you, share with you the expansion and the growth that I know. And if there is distortion because my 3D self is passing out or is hearing every 3 words, there is a problem. So when you're getting information from spirit, and I'm sharing this with you from deepest love, when you're getting information from spirit, you may get information and you may think you hear X, Y, Z. When you go back again in your core and you reconnect again, go back to see if that and verify that the information is still correct. Because for me, a lot of time, I have to tweak one or couple of things because I misheard it. Because I'm so used to the 3D world that whatever I was listening to, I didn't pick up the whole thing. Because it took me, that channeling was so very potent, very powerful. I finally caught it, but it took me like 3 weeks to write. Because I kept going back and getting little tweak, little change here, there. And as I did this, when I finally presented it, it shifted everything for all of you who are receiving it. Now, could I have received it in one fell swoop? Yes. But I'm not there yet. I received it, but I received it like drop by drop. So that's the benefit of doing that kind of work, is that over time, your ability to listen and to connect truly and let the soul be of service to God. And I don't mean being a martyr, because a lot of time, a lot of us think we're being service and we think it's taking a bullet and sacrificing everything what we have for God. It's not the Christian version of the Bible, which is about suffering. I'm talking about real service, which is you take from God and you let it pass through you and you lose nothing. If anything, you get healed and you get more enriched. You lose absolutely nothing because it's not your effort. God is passing it through you. So when, again, this is a Christian thing for all of us who grew up in Christianity. This is huge because a lot of us, at a lot of time, we think we're giving from God and we're trying to be like Christ and all that. The whole idea of suffering and the sacrifice is not originally from Jesus. It is from St. Paul. It's from 2nd century after the death of Christ. It's not the original Christian teaching, because the Christian teaching was about light and illumination and transformation. That idea of the sacrifice it was taken from other teaching, because Paul never met Christ. He got converted and he brought in other information from other belief systems. And unfortunately, this is the way we got domesticated, all of us. And again, that's an identity. The identity is that we have to sacrifice. And if this is what you believe that you have to do, it will take, particularly if it's a religious dogma, it takes a long time to lose that identity into truly what spirit in the car running very fast is trying to tell you. Because everything you will interpret it to the filter of the sacrifice that you know. And to emancipate out of that and drop all of it is a huge thing. Because for many of us who grew up religiously, it's heresy to think otherwise. So as we are expanding and growing, a lot of these small, what appears like small shifts, which are major shifts for us, but in the process of releasing all of this, let's say, for example, the sacrifice identity, as opposed to you saying, I am leaning into God, everything that I need, God will give it to me, and I will share it with the world, and it will be so effortless that I will lose nothing. If anything, every time that God's breath touches me, I am enriched. I become more powerful. I become more wealthy. I become more abundant. I become more illumined. And as you do this and you move through it, it will shift major things inside of you. So we need to be very aware of that, of letting go of all of these, again, identities that we inherited or we were domesticated into believing in. That's why I'm saying we have to have that internal daily conversation with the universal breath and the 5-10 minute conversation we have in our core. It is essential, because when you're that honest and that sincere, in other words, you have to have an ongoing dialogue with your higher power. Archangel Camuel during Wisak was saying that we need to, having a call upon him every day. If you're having that, if you're doing the core query that I've taught you, you're doing it. Because as you go in and you examine and you're having that conversation, you're talking to your God. And that will give you clarity, and it will rattle the very foundation of your belief system, not in a bad way. Initially, it will feel scary, and this is why it's terrifying. For example, if you believe in the sacrifice as per Christianity, and that was the thing that you were holding, letting go of this is major, because it's heresy against everything Christianity is sinful. But historically speaking, Paul got converted toward the beginning of the 2nd century, never met Christ. All of the other disciples were gone. Yet the apostle, the stuff that he wrote influenced Christianity completely. Which is about the sacrifice, the lamb. None of that was early Christianity. It was all about connecting to God, a God that enriches, that gives, and that allows us to be a conduit to let it pass through us. It was not about us losing anything. So I'm saying that once you pass that point and you begin to, and something that religious and that profound is a major shift. And if you're able to move into an acceptance of something else that emancipate your God concept into something else, it will enrich you so powerfully, and you will heal not only yourself, but you will begin to heal and radiate a freedom, a liberation, and you will broadcast it to other people around you. You will entrain them, and you don't have to say it, that people energetically can feel that something shifted when they were next to you, because you're reminding them that they too can find their own freedom and their own liberation. Any questions, any comments?
Just a thought, I'm not sure it's a question, but as we learn to discern, to see or hear beyond the filters of our upbringing, our understanding of who we thought we were, aren't we growing to a point of recognizing that none of this is real, that it's all illusion, and nothing that we have within our frame of reference will allow us to see it?
It's profound what you're saying now, because that's the very nature of the universe. This is what in Tibetan Buddhism they call Maya, the illusions. It's all illusion. But it's a convincing illusion. But as you grow and you evolve spiritually, you have to understand that the illusion is still there, and you have relationship with all kinds of the system that exists in the illusion, and you have to figure out a way to still maintain this relationship, because you are trying to entrain these people into becoming awake. You can't alienate yourself completely from them and telling them it's all BS, it's all illusion, blah, blah, blah. Yes, you can say this every once in a while, but you can't exist in that frame of mind. You see what I'm saying?
I was also thinking, yes, that it's protective as well, in a sense, the illusions of our identity, until we are able to accept the fullness of truth, isn't it? If we were to be exposed to the truth, wouldn't that shatter us in a sense? Because we're not prepared for it.
Absolutely. When I had to let go the sacrifice thing that I had in me growing up Christian and wanting to be a priest, that was major for me. But it served its purpose up to a point. It created a devotional thing inside of me, up to the point where I was prepared to let it go. And in a way, to be perfectly honest with you, in a way, what it did to me is that, remember we talked about this before. The term in Hebrew is called Zerapin. It's translated as the little face of God, right? And it's the Star of David, the interlaced triangles, and it represents a shield of protection. But it's a small version of God. It's a version of God that human consciousness can swallow and can comprehend. Whereas there exists a bigger version of God that's beyond that shield. So we will go to multiple Zerapin incidents as we begin to lose all those identities, because those identities will create. So the shield protects you from a version of God that where if most people on the planet were to accept this, they wouldn't be able to process it. You would have mental breakdown. You will have a lot of problems, right? But when you're trying to ascend, the Seraphim, which is a shield of protection from the higher version of God, is a prison. And that prison you have to shatter. It's the glass ceiling you have to break. And that's what I mean about Mini Bardot and being conscious and inner conversation. Because it's through this inner conversation and asking, when you're sitting down and you're asking, God, if this spirit, talk to me personally. I'm not going to accept a preconceived dogma. I'm sitting with you in my core. Talk to me. Talk to me and let me know if you're working in my footstep, what would you have done? What is your real nature?
But you know, if we also recognize that there are beauties in each reality, in each level of identity before we make the shift, then we shouldn't be also anxious to escape to the next one, or to evolve, or to learn to grow into the next one prematurely, if perhaps that's even a time frame reference, but anxiety will prevent that from happening as well. So we have to accept it's God's plan as well, right, to evolve through this process. And so allowing it to be what it is, rather than search for what we know must be out there, but are to make us unhappy with where we are now.
Yes, yes. I see what you're saying. So in the course of that conversation in my core, a lot of time when I go in, I just feel happy and content. I don't feel anxious. I don't feel like I'm not moving fast enough. I don't feel, I just feel happy and content. That's thing. If anything, it's not happy, is not the right word. I feel at rest. Rest is the right word. Okay? I feel completely at rest. And when I'm in that state where I'm at rest, then there's nothing for me to, but there are moments when I go in there, something is stirring. And when that something is stirring, I have to follow it and try to figure out what information in that car that's going very fast is trying to tell me.
I got you. So it's a gestation period, really.
Yes. You have to allow it to happen when it happens. And by the way, you're not the healer. The conscious self is not the healer that's guiding everything. That healer exists in you when you go in your call. You're not in charge of the process. Your God, your higher self will know, because anything that happened prematurely, our psyche is a very fragile system. But it is also the most self-healing and the most resilient. And I'm not the healer. I keep saying this all the time to all of you. You come to me for healing. What I am is a Sherpa. I facilitate a connection to a liberation or an understanding of God that I know, and I pass it through you. But I am not the healer. The healer is in each one of you. And so when you sit down and you have that conversation, the healer will know. And by the way, no matter how much I push energy, I try to symbols, I try to create all kinds. Trust me, your higher self, if your higher self says you're not ready for that transformation, that healing to happen, it's not going to happen. When you're ready, it will initiate things to cause things to begin to break down around you. You will see it in the outside world. It will show up in your inner world. It shows up in your dream. And as all of these things conflict together, you will begin to realize, okay, I must address this. This is where my ego, my conscious self, lean into spirit. Spirit is telling me there is a slight disturbance in my core. I need to lean into it and try to understand what it is. There's a shift coming.
Thank you, Pierre. That really places me in a spot of more of a peaceful nature rather than duty bound to do what I know I should or think I should be doing. So thank you. That
Yeah, it's not about being perfect. It's about being imperfect and listening to that core.
being
The
willing.
core
Yeah.
knows better than you.
Thank you. Thank you.
It knows way better than me. And when I need a jolt, it will give me the jolt. When I need the rest and the repair, because it knows that after a major shift, let's say, for example, for you believing this in the sacrifice to you accepting this idea that the God concept is a healing place, a place of endless flow. It takes a long time for you to accept this and to unpack what that means for you. Therefore, after you shifted that awareness, it's going to give you a time for you to assimilate and process this before the next piece comes in. It knows. And if you, again, the healer is within. And that inner conversation, that inner dialogue is the key to ascendance. The other thing I wanted to add. So this is the ego self conversing, or the chooser conversing to the soul or the spirit, conversing with God. But our subconscious mind is made up of all kinds of other things as well. And I'm gonna basically initiate this conversation today, but I'm not gonna be able to finish it in the time that we have before the end of the class. But I will begin it. Last week, we talked about the whole thing in one class. But I need to focus on these pieces one at a time because the class last week had so many components to it. It's like trying to eat something that's too rich. So I wanted to break it down in pieces for us so that we can begin to unpack and process these things better. So our subconscious mind, Carl Gustav Jung described the conscious self as being the tip of an iceberg, and the subconscious mind being this vast mass of the iceberg, which is underwater but not visible. But that mass underwater is not unified. The ego thinks as one cohesive unit, a singularity. The subconscious mind is fragmented into multiple pieces. And each piece is autonomous of another piece. There are complexes in there. For example, if you were traumatized, if you were somebody yelled at you and kept saying, shut up, and over time that may have created a complex for you to cause you not to have an ability to speak your truth and have a voice. There are other parts in there, so that's a complex. It's a negative program that occurred during this lifetime, or it could be during a past life, and it's buried in the subconscious mind as an autonomous series of reaction. That if you're put in a situation where you have to speak, you have difficulty finding your voice because you've been bullied into believing you don't have a voice. It's not true, but anything you repeat in front of the subconscious mind for more than 21 days straight, or everything that's reinforced continually, sink into the subconscious mind as a law. The subconscious mind is not like a conscious self. It doesn't think linearly. It doesn't choose per se, but it will activate a series of preconceived belief system or reinforced belief system and allow them to manifest. For example, the subconscious mind is what grows your nail, allow you to breathe without thinking, circulate your blood, grow your hair, and all autonomous nervous system function happen because the subconscious mind makes it happen automatically. But if you put something negative in there, it is capable of repeating it ad nauseam. It doesn't care if it's positive or negative because it doesn't think like you and I about positivity or negativity. If it's repeated long enough, it will accept it as truth, and it will cause it to have an autonomous life. And I want you to understand this because for what I'm about to say. So there are bad habits that are in your subconscious mind, but they are good habits. For example, in your life, you might have a habit of being loving to read, or being a kind or loving person, wanting to serve humanity. But there are also negative habits that we may have in there. You might eat a little bit too much. You might, have negative reinforcing things that happen to you that cause you to have these autonomous pieces that are, and all subconscious content want to become conscious. So those autonomous pieces are constantly trying to hijack the ego and trying to take it over temporarily and create chaos in the world around us. So when we are presented in a situation, let's say the example of shut up, is that you're presented in a situation where you're supposed to speak for yourself, you can't find the voice to say it because it had hijacked you and said, you're muted. I don't have a voice. And you can't find the voice to say it. Now, if it's a positive habit, let's say, for example, you're a clean person, or you're a kind person, you want to help the world, you have a good heart and all that, that's great. Keep it there and let it continue to function. But the negative stuff, you want to reprogram into positivity. So that's one part of the subconscious mind, which are the complexes and the programs. Some of them positive, some of them negative. And other parts that's equally important, and probably more important than even the subconscious program, are called the archetypes. Archetypes are like the very metrics that created life itself. They are preconceived behavior and role that every human being, every living being on the planet has the capacity to manifest. Whether it is the mother or the father, the child, the warrior, the wise person, the seducer, the destroyer, we all have the capacity within us to show up and demonstrate all these things. One can think of them almost like riverbeds, okay? They are not the water that flows into the river, but they are the rocks, the sediment that creates the riverbed. And depending, and these archetypes have positive and negative aspect, because depending on external events, when the archetype is trying to manifest as the child or the parent, if your parent in this lifetime were very abusive, the lens, the first experience of it you had was so abusive that you as a parent may tend to also become abusive. So the riverbed in the parent archetype may have a lot of rock and sediment and create a turbulent water, a turbulent flow. So the archetype itself comes from the collective unconscious of all of humanity connected together, 9 billion people connecting, let's say, for example, the mother, the father archetype. Abstractly by itself, it's neither positive nor negative. But when we project onto them our own experiences with these lenses, meaning the experiences we had of them in early childhood or sometime even in past lives, those lenses and the filters will distort them. Here comes the distortion again. And when they begin to manifest in us because we have disturbance, the flow is turbulent, or the flow becomes just a trickle because we blocked it, we created a dam. Or it's very muddy. Archetypes and complexes and programs can become identities, temporarily blocking us from doing things, temporarily taking over, particularly when they have negative components, temporarily taking over and trying to hijack our ego self and creating havoc in our life. Because if a situation in the outside world presents itself where you have to be the wise person, the loving, kind, or the healer, and then instead you're the destroyer, it is an appropriate use of archetypical forces. It doesn't match what needs to happen in the external world. So someone who's trying to ascend and become more godlike has to not only contend with their own ego self and their relationship with the micro identity shift that I was talking about, but you have to also understand what's happening in your subconscious mind. And you have to somehow tame the menagerie of character that exists in the subconscious mind and ask them to funnel all their energy to the ego self and ask and make sure that you, I, the chooser, have the final say and is in charge and in control of everything. That takes years of internal conversation with these various archetypes and these programs to know, for example, to understand when the negative aspect of the destroyer is showing up, when the negative aspect of the warrior is showing up, when the positive aspect of the seducer is showing up. Because, and the thing to understand, we all have all of the archetypes in us. Because when you begin to realize that you have the destroyer archetype, I had an experience with my destroyer. I shared this in the last class, and I'm very quickly mentioning this again. Accidentally, when I was about 18 or 19, I was reading Carl Gustav Jung. Jung was talking about dealing with the shadow and merging with the shadow. And I decided I'm going to merge with my shadow. I'm going to merge with my destroyer. And I wished it and desired it, and it happened, and I didn't really know it happened. But what I do remember, and this is fast forward 3 years, I was channeling that destroyer for 3 years straight. I didn't even know I was doing it. It had taken over as an identity. My friends, some of my friends loved me because the destroyer happened to be extremely intelligent, extremely fast, and its entire purpose is to shatter and break everything apart. So I would walk into a room in moments' time, that archetype would analyze things, and I would go in and make comments to people, to things, and I would shatter everything around me. And I would walk out laughing with glee, thinking to myself, my God, I feel so powerful. Now, part of this, and the reason why also that archetype took over so quickly in me, it's because I was emotionally and physically abused by my father, and I never had a sense of control over anything that happened to me. So there was a deficiency in my spiritual psychology. In other words, there was another part, the part that we call the programs, I had a deficiency of not being in charge or in control. The destroyer made a choice to support that part and to by taking over and giving me an illusion of control, because it was an illusion. When I realized what was happening, somebody pointed it out to me, and I finally was able to accept it. It took a long time for that to happen. When I finally saw it, I was in total shock. And it took me several days, a few weeks of having meditation and inner conversation with the calling the destroyer forward. And the destroyer showed up in meditation. I saw her, because for me it was female. A lot of time, your alter ego, if you're male, is female. Your alter ego as a woman is male. It's called the anima for men and the animus for a female. So she showed up. I saw her. And we negotiated. I said, I'm not trying. Let's just say, when I went back in my head over the 3 years that preceded, I was not proud at all of what had happened. In hindsight, I was actually quite shameful. I was quite ashamed. But what I realized at that point, it was very clear to me. Trying to exorcise that part of my body would be trying to remove one of my vital organs, like my kidney or my lung. I cannot exist without it. So I'm going to make a truce. I called it and I said, we're going to have a conversation, because it's clear that you're controlling for the past 3 years every aspect of my life, my thinking and everything else. You need to retreat and go back in the subconscious mind. You don't belong there. There is an equilibrium imbalance. I'm not exorcising you out of my life. I'm going to be in need of you because you're important to the economy of my entire psyche. You're very important to me. Now, there are more transcendent archetypes. For example, the wise person archetype is a loving archetype. You don't just keep what appears to be good and then throw out, try to somehow amputate these things out. It cannot be done. You have to find a way to create peace and accept all the pieces of yourself. And guess what? What this whole situation did for me is that I can recognize when somebody is struggling with their destroyer like this, because I went through it. And more importantly, I have the empathy and the acceptance to know how to talk to them because of what I went through. Therefore, as a healer, as a human being, as an ascended being in process, it gives me more compassion, more acceptance. Any questions, any comments? We all have them, okay? So next week I can go deeper in archetypes and talk at greater length about this. And then the last piece, because they tend to take over and they become an identity. Because when you're, again, it's because we're not conscious. When these pieces of our subconscious mind take over, this is why we need to be conscious all the time, self-aware. I didn't realize it happened. It took me 3 years to realize it occurred. And when it did, I did the correction. Now, whatever harm it may have caused, I gotta live with the memory. There's nothing I can do about changing or making amends or repairing anything. it's a done deal. But it also gave me compassion, it gave me understanding, it gave me empathy. And when I'm in need of her, she's like with me in seconds. I just lean on her, I just think about, I need the destroy. It's without even finishing the thought, she's in.
So, hi, here.
Yes. Hi, how are you, Noel?
Yeah, good to hear you and see you again.
I'm sorry, say that again?
Oh, good to see you and hear you again.
Oh, wonderful. Same here.
Um, Question about the archetypes. Is there like a fixed amount of them that we need to identify, um, and then be aware of their existence in us?
Yes, there are 12 major archetypes. I've done classes on the archetypes before, but there are 12 major one. You have some of them are more ascended, less ascended. You have the destroyer. It's probably the closest of them all. The child, the mother, the father, the wise one, the warrior, the seducer. By the way, interestingly enough, the seducer may sound like it's a hedonistic, it's all about sexuality, but no ascended master can teach without connecting to the positive aspect of the seducer. Because the positive aspect of Venus or Aphrodite, it's what allows you to broadcast and to present in a favorable manner the information that you're trying to communicate to others. It is actually about love, but higher love. There is lower love, which is sexuality, but there is higher love. So the archetypes, there are 12 of them in total, major one, and they're sub to the first 12. Now, if you are able to bring a piece, all 12 of them together, it will allow, it will heal a tremendous amount of your own psyche. Again, don't try to amputate them. It's impossible. It's an impossible task. The thing is to have to talk to them and negotiate and try to figure out a way for them to coexist in peace with you as the chooser. Does that make any sense?
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
It seems
Anybody?
to me that we would have to, in order for us to ascend or to transition to the next level of reality, that the archetypes also have to evolve.
Yes. Yeah.
So a lower octave, let us say, destroyer, such as you experienced, perhaps, would transcend in itself that aspect of the matrix, would have to transcend itself before you could then move to the next dimensional reality.
Here is the beauty about the destroyer. And this is the positive aspect of it. It's the energy that allows a woman to have a natural rejection of a fetus when the fetus is not viable. In other words, when I have it, for example, when I have a force or an energy in me, in my subconscious mind, let's say sometimes external things that are being projected toward me, like an archon or a dark energy or an invasion, I can ask the destroyer to remove it from me. The destroyer is defense. Do you understand? It's defense and protection.
So it's not attack, such as
No.
witnessing. It isn't one then to remain as it was,
Yes.
but to be elevated. And does that take a conversation with them, or do they?
Yes. Yes.
No.
It's well, it wasn't just one conversation. It's multiple conversations.
Really?
because you have to think of them as being autonomous. Not only do they exist on your own psyche, but they're connected to a system that is 9 billion people have also a destroyer. It's immense. It's huge. So you first make peace inside of you, and if there's peace inside of you, when you connect to the bigger destroyer, it will support you.
Hmm. Amazing.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely fascinating. It's just so powerful and so liberating. And once you begin to make the peace, the destroyer can help you. Like, for example, if you have another, like it attempted to do the same thing for me. I had a complex in me that was so broken because I never felt in control. I was so abused by my dad when I was younger. It broke me, and that archetype came in trying to help me. It did it incorrectly because the chooser, was not doing it. But the desire from that archetype was to shore me up, to give me a sense of to heal me, to give me a sense of control, of being in charge. I had to recognize, and when I had the conversation with her, I had to say thank you. It came from a motherly instinct. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yes.
I thank you for this class, by the way. You just said something that blew my mind away, and I wanted to make sure that I understand what you just said. You said that 9 billion people is sharing the same archetype, in that instant, the destroyer.
Yep.
That you all share. So, and you said it takes multiple conversation.
Yep.
In order to get to it. So in my mind, I'm going, okay. In other words, it's almost like the head of this destroyer is a mothership. I'm gonna tell you what I figured in my mind. So I don't know if I'm correct or not.
Okay.
So in other words, the big, like the big, like this destroyer, like that there's a head.
Yes.
Okay, so it's almost like it's the mothership.
Yep.
And from the mothership there's a lot of tentacle. You say that word in English? Yeah.
Tentacles.
Yes, there's a lot of tentacles, and all of them are reaching out to 9 billion people. All of them are reaching out to 9 billion people individually.
Yes.
And in order for us to really have a conversation with them, it takes a lot of negotiation, because they have to, in other words, whichever it is that they have to transmit to the mothership what it is that you would like to accomplish.
Okay, let me stop you here. Okay, so particularly as it relates to the destroyer archetype, I don't want to connect the destroyer archetype of 9 billion people on Earth at this moment.
Yes, I understand.
Because of what's happening in the world right now. It's too crazy. Okay?
Yeah.
So what we need, including me, what we all need to do is have a conversation with our own inner destroyer.
Okay.
Or inner warrior or inner child, or we need to have a conversation with this internal part of ourselves. Once we have achieved cohesiveness and cooperation, and you begin to work, you can think of them as slices in a pie.
Okay.
Okay. And when they're all working in one wheel as one pie, and basically they're fragmented, they're all over. But when you can bring them together as one pie, every slice fitting in, it's like reassembling a puzzle piece, a jigsaw puzzle. Once you are reassembling and they're working together, you will find that the collective unconscious of humanity will respond to support the unity that now exists in you.
Okay.
You have to create the unity within first.
Okay. All right. Thank you so much.
Yeah, think of a jigsaw puzzle. The pieces are all over the place, and it's chaos. But you create a harmony within yourself. Once the harmony is created, then at times, and you're not going to necessarily call the wise woman, the wise man archetype of the entire of 9 billion people, not intentionally. You're going to talk to your own inner archetype, and if what you're requesting demand for the collective unconscious to respond, the collective unconscious will respond.
Okay. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Yes, no problem. Any other questions or comments? Let's take a 5-minute break and then we'll do a closing meditation. 5 minutes to get water, and then we'll do a closing meditation. Take a very deep and slow breath. And as you inhale and exhale deeply and slowly, close your eyes. And allow the universal life force that permeates everything to enter into your lungs. Keep breathing deeply and slowly. And let your soul and your awareness drop in the middle of your chest. Please forgive me. I love you. And I let go. Please forgive me. I love you. And I let go. Let your mind and your heart sync with each other. It is as if your eyes are now located in your heart. Keep breathing deeply and slowly. Now let your entire being go into coherence where your mind and your heart are in sync. Just keep breathing deeply and slowly. And listen. Listen to your core and central axis. Keep breathing deeply and slowly. And listen as if the more than 50 trillion cells in your body had ears. And from the bottom of your feet, moving through your entire central axis and going all the way back outside of your head into God. Listen. What kind of insights, information, or knowing that this part of your body is trying to share with you? Pay attention to any sensations, expansion, knowing, or rest. That this part of your body is trying to share with you. Beloved God, give me safe passage as I surrender my attachments, fears, and control unto you. I ask for your guidance, your love, your support, and your protection. show me the aspects of myself that is in need of repair and correction. Guide me that I may find your peace, your serenity, and your rest, that all aspects of my subconscious mind, my soul, and my connection to you serve the highest good. Help me repair, healed, and align my consciousness to your compassion, love, and mercy. Thank you for the blessings. I accept the gifts and I receive with gratitude. Thank you for the blessings. I accept the gifts and I receive with gratitude. Thank you for the blessings. I accept the gifts and I receive with gratitude. Take a very deep and slow breath. And whenever you feel ready, you can open your eyes.
Well, thank you, Pierre. That meditation proved to uncover some deeper issue than I'd realized, and I felt a shift happen for it. I appreciate that so much. Thank you.
You're welcome. You're welcome. Wonderful. Wonderful. I want to thank all of you for being with me tonight, and I look forward to seeing you next week. If you're listening to us on YouTube, like this video, subscribe to the channel. Thank you for my Patreon supporters. Love you all. Thank you all. Big kisses. Enjoy the rest of the week. I love you so much. Good night, everyone.
Good night. Good night.
Thank you, everyone.
Good night, all. Thank you. Thank you. Good night, Dennis.
Thank you, Pierre.
Bye. Bye. Love you.
Good night.
Good
Love
night.
you.
Bye, Noel. Bye.